and welcome to this episode of Digitally. Business and technology are increasingly intersecting, and every company is now a technology company. And digital transformation is often defined as business transformation that just happens to be delivered with digital technologies. But technology is no longer the long pole in the tent, and it's the people, it's process, it's data, it's experience, it's change management. These are increasingly the things that drive success. And so for digital and technology leaders, getting the right sponsorship from stakeholders like the board and the rest of the leadership team, and communicating effectively with the larger organization is increasingly a key success criteria. And this is exactly what we want to explore today with my dear colleague, Sandeep Sen. Sandeep is the CIO of Linde. They're a $33 billion industrial gases and engineering company founded in Germany and operating in almost 100 countries now. He's been in the business over 2 decades, implemented multi-million-dollar SAP and other change management programs, driven digital transformation right from the core. And interestingly, he comes from a non-technology, actually is a finance background. And I recently met up with him at the Executive Technology Board meeting. And so I wanted to spend some time with you today, Sandeep. Thank you for joining us, first off.
Thank you for the invite, Sanjay. Great to see you.
Sandeep, you've been both delivering and actually receiving thousands of presentations and technology. When you're on the receiving side, what are 2 or 3 things that really bug you on what you get to listen to?
I think the first one is really the time it takes for people to what I call GTP, which is get to the point. There's a lot of small, particularly, regardless of whether the message is good or bad, I do find people don't really get to the point pretty early, and that's a mistake. I think I've seen it a number of times. There are others, but this is pretty much the most important one. The second one is, of course, the length of the presentation. Presentations are tending to become more and more, or longer and longer, and people seem to need more words to deliver the same message. So I would probably say those 2 are critical.
I love those 2. I mean, we talk about GPT, but GTP now, I think I'm going to start using that as well. I love it. And I think succinctness and brevity and getting to the punchline fast. Now shifting you on the other side. So if now you're presenting, how do you make sure that you actually get to the point right away? And how do you actually, how do you end up being razor sharp on what you want to say?
Yeah, I think for me, the preparation is most important. And it is very important that the speaker or me is very clear on the objective of the presentation. Broadly, presentations are of 2 types. You either inform or you persuade, right? And depending on whether it's a presentation inform, so for example, that could be on a project update or something like that, or it's a persuade, you got to massage, you got to tailor, you got to adapt your presentation accordingly. So I think the objective is very clear. And it's also good to articulate that when one starts, so that the audience is also clear what to expect from that session. And if there is a mismanagement, whether it is clear at that point, and an alignment is required.
I love what you're saying, right? Because the reality is almost anything we do, whether it's talking to a peer, whether it's addressing a town hall, whether it's talking to a board, frankly, whether it's talking to my wife. I mean, we are always trying to persuade, and persuade may be a harsh word, but trying to, and sell is even a harder word, but you're really trying to get a point across, and you're trying to make it compelling. You're trying to get people to buy into what you're saying. And so literally in almost everything you do, you're actually selling or pushing or persuading or, convincing or, and so on and so forth. But I think the point you're making is set it up, right? So when you go into a meeting, you set it up, whether it's an information meeting, whether it's a decision meeting, whether you're expecting a reaction on yes, no, whether you're just informing them. And I think being clear on that upfront then sets the right agenda and the right expectation from the participants, as you rightfully pointed out.
Absolutely. And it influences the content also. The storyline or the shape of the content is influenced based on what the objective is. So I think that is, for me, a very, very critical start point.
Okay, so look, you said GTP, which I got. You said brevity and concise, I got. You talked about preparing and getting ready for this, because everything in every conversation, you're persuading someone, but setting expectations appropriately. How do you prepare for this? Like, walk us through that mechanism.
I think, again, it goes back to the content. Yeah, let's take that the whole objective of the presentation is around a topic of inform. Yeah, it could be bad news, good news, or just neutral news, right? In that situation, very often you're sort of trying to work out if it's bad news, and mostly those are the what I call the interesting ones. Do you deliver it beginning? Do you deliver it in the middle? Or do you deliver it at the end, right? And I personally, my preference is always follow the Michael Lewin approach. He's the great storyteller for toys and Pixar. Sorry. And his view is, take the audience through a journey, starting with the sad, but always end up on a high. Give an element of positivity at the end. And therefore, that's I really follow that. Whether it's bad news, give it up front. That delivers trust, credibility. Make the message direct, don't faff around. But explain why the situation has come up, how are you going to learn from it, and how are you going to improve from that process. Leave a certain element of positivity at the end of that message. However, that has a double-edged sword. You can use that card once, you can come back, and then if you have to follow the storyline again, bad news ending up in hope, you're a little bit losing your credibility. So I would say, from a strategy perspective, deliver bad news first, but then make sure that you know your topic so that you're not repeating that. Now, conversely, if you're delivering good news or neutral news, also I would say go with that same strategy. But generally, keep the presentations or the communications on good news or neutral news shorter than the ones delivering bad news. If it's good news and you're saying it, hey, you know what, dear colleagues, blah, blah, it's all good, you're really not going to get a lot of traction or engagement after that because people are going to sort of check out. If it's good news, I don't need to worry about it. Great.
I love it. So I want to actually go into something that I hear a lot about, which is many of the technology presentations that boards, executive teams, members of the corporation receive end up being too technical, that they're too dense, that they're difficult to grok. And so the art of simplification and correlating it with kind of the business reality becomes a really important one. I want to explore that with you because you've done it extremely well in our conversations. I can see that very clearly, obviously in your own corporation, et cetera. What is the trick to doing it right?
I think being a non-technology person helps because when you're under pressure, I can't fall back on technical jargons. So, you can't fall back on your sweet spot. So I suspect being a non-technical person helps me, but definitely simplification is 101 of any effective communication to make an impact on your audience, regardless of whether you're informing or persuading. And there's no cookbook, but I suppose some of the basics are, well, the first one is obviously keep the technical jargon out. No matter what you do, don't use technical terms, because if your audience, right, can't even understand some of the words you're using or the terms you're using, you are going to lose them beyond the point. So take the technical jargon out. This is easier said than done, but it is still the most important bit. And for me, the second one is very important, and which is understand and know your audience so that you can actually determine at what level are you going to play your knowledge. If your audience is reasonably articulate on technology, yeah, you've got to make sure that your baseline is a little bit higher than if you were dealing with an audience where the awareness level was a bit low. So for me, the second one is quite important, which is you've got to know each and every member of the audience based on historical experiences, engagement levels, etc. And that helps you to adapt to the audience. That's pretty critical. I would say the third one probably is that regardless of the complexity of the topic or what you're doing, related to business value. Yeah, this is always a fantastic leveler on the language topic. You could have a very complex topic and you're obviously desperately trying to decomplex it. But at the same time, if you're able to link it with the business value, positive or negative, yeah, depending upon the topic, this is a phenomenal way of getting your the audience engaged from that perspective. Yeah, I think that's really cool. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, Sandeep, it's going to be too difficult for me to change who I am, so I can't take the technologist out of me. But the thing I really loved in what you said, and I've used this and I found it to be very effective for myself, is when you're speaking, don't focus on what you want to say, focus on what you want the other person to hear. And then looking at the other person, understanding their framing, their background, their context, then your mind is actually working in what is it that I want her or him to take away, as opposed to what is it that I want to say. And I think that's been one way I've been able to get around my handicap of having as you say, some technology jargon. But I love the point about relating it back to business value.
Yeah, I think that really was pretty cool. And I just want to add one more point, which I've seen a lot of people fall into the trap of, where they tend to delegate complex topics. And